Tonight's story will take you to the middle of the sea, to a place where no one stays for long, Matinus Rock Lighthouse. This is not just a story. It's a real incident reported by two Coast Guard officers in 2017. They were sent to check a lighthouse, but something else was waiting for them. My name's Nate, and I've been with the Coast Guard since 2015. I've always loved the sea, the smell of salt in the air, the sound of waves hitting metal hulls, the calm that only the open water can bring. It gets in your blood, this life, but there's some memories the waves never quite wash away. They just sink to the bottom, waiting for a quiet moment to surface again. In 2017, I was assigned a routine maintenance mission to a place called Matinus Rock. It was a remote, automated lighthouse, miles from the mainland, a lonely sentinel in the vast gray expanse. The only way to reach it was by boat or helicopter. The structure itself was all cold iron and echoing stairs, with one small auxiliary shed clinging to its base, filled with fuel drums and rusting tools. There was no plumbing, no power grid, and barely a sliver of a signal on a good day. It was the very definition of isolation. Usually it's a solo job, just 3 days of inspection and log reports. But the year before, there had been a series of unexplained electrical failures, glitches that the reports couldn't quite pin down. So this time, as a precaution, they sent 2 of us, me and a quiet, steady guy named Josh. The first few days were exactly what we expected. We fell into a simple rhythm. Daily checkups of the machinery, basic meals from tins, and long, quiet nights playing endless games of cards by the light of a lantern before turning in. The isolation was there, a tangible presence, but it was the kind we were trained for. It was on the 5th night that the silence began to change. I woke up around 2 a.m., not from a noise, but from a sensation. The air in our small quarters had grown heavier, colder, and it carried a strange static charge that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I looked out the small, thick window. The sky was a perfect starry black, and the sea was a calm, dark sheet. Yet something felt deeply wrong. That's when I saw it. The great sweeping arm of the beacon light was still, frozen. I shook Josh awake. "Something's wrong with the light. It stopped turning." We climbed the narrow spiral stairs to the top, the cold iron biting through our socks. The gear mechanism was churning away, but the beam was locked in place. Jammed between the heavy cogs was a piece of cloth, just an old torn rag bleached by sun and salt. We assumed it must have been blown in by a gust, a freak accident. We pulled it free, the gears groaned back into motion, and the light stabbed through the darkness once more. We laughed it off, a nervous sound in the vast humming room, and went to bed. The next night, at the same hour, it happened again. The same unnatural stillness, the same dead light. This time, when we climbed up, the cloth wasn't a nameless rag. It was a woman's red scarf, soaked through with seawater and reeking of salt and something darker, like old rust. My blood ran cold as I realized there was no logical way for it to have gotten in. The housing was sealed. No open vents, no cracks wide enough, no birds could have carried it. It was as if the sea itself had woven it through solid iron. We took it outside and burned it in a metal drum, the flames hissing as they consumed the damp fabric. The next 2 nights, Josh started to change. The easygoing companion from the first few days was gone, replaced by a silent, hollowed-out version. He stopped talking, barely touched his food, and I'd hear him shifting restlessly in his bunk long into the night. He'd just sit by the window, staring down at the black, jagged rocks being by the surf. One night, I found him whispering, his breath fogging the cold glass. When I asked who he was talking to, he didn't even turn. "Someone's calling me," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I told him it was just the isolation, the wind playing tricks on our minds. But the next night, I caught him at the window again, his eyes wide and fixed on a point in the darkness. He said he saw a woman just sitting on the rocks, her hair streaming in the wind. But when the beacon turned, its blinding light sweeping across the scene, there was nothing there but foam and stone. By the 10th night, the air in the lighthouse was thick with a dread you could almost taste. Josh was a ghost to himself, his eyes dark and distant. That night, I was jolted awake not by a feeling, but by a sound. Footsteps. They were coming from the beacon room directly above us. Heavy, slow, deliberate. They weren't Josh's, and they certainly weren't mine. I scrambled out of my bunk to find Josh already standing frozen on the bottom step of the spiral staircase, staring up into the darkness. As I reached him, the footsteps stopped. Then came a long metallic creak that set my teeth on edge. We went up together, our hearts hammering against our ribs. The door to the beacon room was wide open, not just ajar, but flung back violently against the wall as if kicked. Inside, one of the heavy glass bulb fixtures had been manually unscrewed and was dangling by its wires. And there, wedged deep between the central gears, was the same cloth. Only this time, it was black, sodden, and dripping cold salt water onto the floor. The air was freezing, a deep, unnatural cold that seeped into our bones. I swear I could feel a presence standing right behind me, a pressure against my back. Josh began to mumble, his voice cracking with terror. "She's angry! She's angry we turned the light back on!" We didn't wait. We fled down the stairs, barricading ourselves in the lower quarters, shoving a heavy metal shelf against the door. We didn't sleep a wink that night, just sat there in the dark, listening to the sea and the hum of the light we had restarted, waiting for the sun. At first light, with my hands still trembling, I finally got a shaky signal on the radio. I called it in to the base, my voice cracking as I requested immediate extraction. I kept it vague, citing persistent equipment failure and personnel issues. I couldn't bring myself to say more. By some small mercy, a boat was dispatched, and by afternoon it cut through the sullen, gray waves to retrieve us. The ride back was a silent, heavy fog. Josh stood at the stern, his back to me, his shoulders hunched against the wind and something else, something invisible. He didn't speak a single word. I didn't either. What was there to say? We were met at the dock by Petty Officer Davis, a grizzled veteran with kind eyes. He took one look at our pale, drawn faces and simply nodded. As we were debriefed in his office, the warm, solid ground feeling foreign under my feet, Davis leaned back in his chair. "Glad your boys are back in one piece," he said, shuffling some papers. "Though your call this morning had us scratching our heads for a minute." I looked up, confused. "My call?" "Yeah, the one at 0330. The line was terrible, full of static. The comms watch said it sounded like you were asking if we'd send a third man. Said there were 3 of you out there. Then the line went dead." He gave a short, gruff laugh. "We just figured the ancient radio on that rock was finally giving up the ghost for good. I was about to chew you out for not using the proper emergency channel until your real call came through." The blood drained from my face. The air in the warm, stuffy office turned icy. I could feel Josh go rigid beside me. 03:30. That was right in the heart of the night, right after we had heard the footsteps, right when we were huddled behind that barricaded door, too terrified to make a sound, let alone use the radio. We hadn't made that call. I just stared at Davis, my mouth dry as dust. I managed a weak, must been a glitch in the line, and looked away before he could see the sheer, undiluted terror in my eyes. The debriefing ended shortly after that. There were forms to sign, reports to be filled with blank spaces where the real story should have been. Josh quit the Coast Guard within a week. He moved inland, I heard, to a place with no sight of the ocean. He never spoke of what happened to anyone, and I didn't have the heart to press him. How could I? We both knew what that call meant. It wasn't a glitch. Something hadn't just been on the island with us. It was in the lighthouse, in our space, using our equipment, mimicking a voice, maybe mine, maybe his, we'll never know, trying to lure someone else out to those lonely, cursed rocks. The third man it spoke of wasn't coming from the mainland. He was already there. As for me, I stayed. The sea is a siren's call I could never fully resist. It's a part of me, its rhythm the very beat of my heart. I still find peace on the water, on a bright day with the sun sparkling on the waves, but I've never again volunteered for lighthouse duty. I can't, because the memory of Matinus Rock is a stain on my soul, a cold spot that never quite warms. The logical part of my mind, the trained Coast Guardsman, tries to rationalize it. A series of coincidences, cabin fever, a shared psychological break. But in my gut, in the place where real fear lives, I know what we experienced. And sometimes, on nights when the waves are a little too calm and the sky is a little too clear, when I'm out on patrol and the world is painted in shades of moonlit blue and inky black, I'll see it from the corner of my eye, a flicker of deep, unnatural red, a scarf fluttering in the mist where no scarf should be, right where the cruel, jagged teeth of Matinus disappear into the hungry, dark water. And I'll remember the static on a dead line, and a voice that wasn't mine, asking a question we were too afraid to answer. I'll quickly look away, focus on the instruments, on the solid deck beneath my feet. I never look back. Some lights, once they go out, are better left in the darkness.